Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Jeff Brown. Hopefully you're excited about getting started today, as I am super excited to be starting out on this journey with you. The topic that I want to cover today, the topic that I want to give you some insight on today, is to show you how to get and direct your body to burn body fat for fuel by reducing the total number of grams of carbs a day that you consume. And again, let me say that one more time. The topic that I want to give you insight on today is how do you get your body to burn body fat for fuel by reducing the total number of grams of carbs a day that you consume, okay? The reason this topic is really important is due to the fact that no matter what you eat, no matter how fancy the recipe is, when the human body digests all the food that we consume, once that food is broken down and digested, all that food will become one of three things. It will become some fats, some proteins, and carbohydrates. Again, all the food that we eat and consume, once the body breaks it down, will become some fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. Okay? So the next question is, which one is the main culprit in all the obesity and the diabetes and other health conditions that we see in our culture? Is it the fat that's making us bigger and sicker? Is it the protein, or is it the carbohydrates? What do you think? If you chose fats, I'm not necessarily disappointed, because if you've been living in this country since the 1970s, you would have been led to believe that it is the amount of fat in the American diet that's the main culprit in all the weight gain and obesity. But this is not the truth. The culprit is the carbohydrates. So if you answer that correctly, you're right. Carbs are the problem. But it's not a particular carb. It's not necessarily a good carb versus a bad carb. It's really the total number of grams of carbs a day that we're consuming on average. So this discussion is about showing you how to manipulate the number of grams of carbs a day that you consume, and as a result, to direct your body to burn body fat for fuel. Now, the human body can principally burn three types of fuel for energy. The body can burn protein for fuel. The body, of course, can burn fat for fuel, or the body can burn carbohydrates in the form of glucose for fuel. Now, just to let you know, the body almost never wants to burn protein for fuel. Why? Because your muscles and your organs are made of protein, so the last thing your body wants to do is to consume your muscles and your organs, of course. This is not compatible with life. Now, the other two primary sources of fuel for the body, of course, will be your fat and will be the glucose or the carbohydrates in your bloodstream. Okay? So our goal here is to show you how to get your body to preferentially burn your body fat versus the sugar in your blood. Now here's an insight as well. If your body has a choice, it's never going to touch the body fat that's available to it if there's an abundance of glucose in the bloodstream. Now why is this the case? This is the case because to your body, fat means something very differently than what fat means to you. To the human body, fat is life insurance. It means that the human body can live another day just in case there's a food shortage or famine that could break out, okay? So just know that to your body, fat means something very differently than what it means to you. So if the body has a choice between burning your body fat for fuel versus burning the sugar or the glucose in your bloodstream for fuel, the body's going to go for that blood sugar every time. Make sense? So let's get started. Okay, so the first step in understanding how to get your body to burn body fat for fuel by reducing the total number of grams of carbs a day is to first understand exactly what is a carb. What types of foods are really carbohydrates. So what we're going to do here is to simply divide carbohydrates and foods that are carbs into three main categories. Now, I'm sure you've heard about different types of carbs most of your life, if not all of your life. I'm sure you've heard about fast carbs and slow carbs and good carbs and bad carbs, but we're going to simplify things. And we're going to break carbs down into three main categories, okay? So the first category of carbohydrates are what we call simple carbs, and they're also known as sugars. The second category of carbs are what we call complex carbs, and they're also known as primarily starches. And then the third category of carb that's probably going to surprise you, that is actually a carb, is indigestible carbohydrates, primarily known as fiber. Yes, fiber is a type of carbohydrate, okay? So the three different types of carbs that we have so far, the three categories of carbs, are your simple carbs, aka your sugars, your complex carbs, aka your starches, and then your indigestible carbs, aka fiber, okay? So what I'm going to do next here is to list in the first category, your simple carbs. I'm going to list some common food examples of carbs that belong in this category. Now, if you like, this may be a good time to go ahead and pause the video and test yourself by writing out food examples of simple carbs that you think belong in this particular, the first category of your carbohydrates, okay? And I'll list them here in just a second. First type of food example that's a simple carb, of course, is table sugar. And when I say table sugar, I'm talking about the white stuff, the brown stuff, the organic stuff, the turbinado stuff. Table sugar is table sugar. Second example of a simple carb is the category of candies. Of course, candies are simple carbs because candies are made primarily of sugar, if not majority of sugar. Next category of carbs, simple carbs that is going to be the category of desserts. Of course, desserts tend to have a lot of sugar in them, so that makes sense. What about the fourth example of a simple carbohydrate? That would be honey. Believe it or not, although honey is all natural, it comes straight from Mother Nature, just understand that a pack of honey will have more sugar often than a pack of sugar. Okay? And right now, I'm not even saying what you can and cannot have. I want to make sure that you know exactly what's a carb and what's not a carb and what type of carb it actually may be. Okay? Next example of a simple carbohydrate is fruit. So all fruits have sugar in them. So anytime you're having a piece of fruit, just understand you're having sugar. You're having a form of a simple carbohydrate. Now, know this, all fruit are not created equally. Bananas are considered fruit candy, whereas your berries are going to have much less sugar. By the end of this presentation, you'll have a list of fruit which are good to do if you do them in the right amounts. Okay, what else? Since fruit are on the list, of course, juices would be there. So virtually all commercially available juices will have a certain amount of sugar, and in most cases, quite a lot of sugar. Okay? Next example, food example of a simple carbohydrate would be soda. Okay? Soda often is going to be sweetened with high fructose corn syrup or cane sugar. I like to say that soda for the most part is liquid candy. Soda is not hydration. We'll come back to that, but just understand, in my opinion, soda is a form of liquid candy. Now, commercial juices are not far off, and for the most part, commercial juices are virtually equivalent, and in some cases, commercial juices will have more sugar than soda. Okay? So what else do we have here? Syrup. So even if you go and tap the maple tree yourself, syrups are going to have, of course, a lot of sugar in them. So what about agave nectar, AGAVE? Agave nectar is a more natural form of sugar. It's a brown liquid. It's slightly thinner than honey. Is it more natural than white bleached table sugar? Yes, it is, but agave sugar is liquid sugar. Okay, what else? What about dairy? Dairy products belong in the simple carb category because of the type of sugar that's found in dairy, and the name of that sugar is lactose. Lactose, Lactose. Lactose is the chemical name for dairy sugar. So when I'm saying dairy products, I'm talking about cow's milk, of course. I'm talking about certain types of cheeses, but thankfully not all cheeses. I'm talking about yogurt and, of course, ice cream and things like that. Okay? What else is on this list? alcohol. Okay, alcohol certainly would belong in the simple carb category because alcohol will have sugar from the fruit or the grain that it was made from. Now, there are some exceptions, and those are going to be the distilled liquors, but we'll come back to that. Generally speaking, starting out in a weight loss program like this for the first time, whatever amount of alcohol you're currently drinking, you want to cut back by half, generally speaking, but we'll give you more specifics as we go ahead. Okay? Next would be energy drinks and sports drinks. So many energy drinks will have lots of sugar inside, and of course lots of sports drinks will also have sugar added. Now, if you're outdoors in the hot sun and you're running a marathon, drinking a Gatorade may make sense. But if you're drinking a sports drink and you're not doing a sport, you're going to end up getting a lot of sugar that way. Okay, what else? Sweet sauces. So sauces like teriyaki sauce, even barbecue sauce and ketchup and things like that. So you got to be careful with those sauces. Generally speaking, when you're going out, particularly if you didn't make the sauce yourself and you don't know exactly what's inside of it, you want to order your meal and then have the sauce on the side so then you can decide how much sauce you use. Okay, does that make sense? So the first category of carbohydrates are going to be your simple carbs, also considered and also known as your sugars. Second category of carbohydrates are complex carbs, also called starches. So what do you think are some food examples of starches or starchy foods that belong in this complex carb category? So if the first thing that came to mind is rice, you would be exactly right. And really, all types of rice belong in this group of complex carbs. So we're talking the white stuff, the brown stuff, and even the wild rice. Now, white rice will have a lot more starch than wild rice, but eating any kind of rice in abundance when you're trying to lose significant amounts of weight don't really go together, okay? But have no fear, there are 3 stages to weight loss. There's the active phase, there's the transition phase, and then there's the maintenance phase. So the things that you're going to be doing in this very first phase of weight loss, right in the beginning of the active phase, doesn't mean that you'll have to do for the rest of your life. So for a while, you may decide to significantly cut back on rice. Then down the road, as you start to approach your goal weight, you may say, you know what, I've learned through trial and error that I can handle a half a cup or a cup of brown rice or wild rice twice a week and not gain weight, nor do I lose weight. Either way, we'll figure it out as you go along. What are some other food examples of starchy foods? Potatoes, okay? White potatoes, red potatoes, sweet potatoes. White potatoes will have a little bit less, white potatoes will have more starch than the sweet potatoes. When I say sweet, I'm not talking about candied yams, but all potatoes are very starchy foods, okay? What about flour-made foods? What are some foods made from flour? Of course, you're going to have your breads, you're going to have pastas, you're going to have cold cereals. So your cornflakes and your Captain Crunch and your Cheerios. Now, the flour-made food category could go on almost forever because it's the batter in your fried food. It's a thickener in your gravy. Virtually all baked goods will be made of some type of flour. Now, as an aside, the so-called really bad carbs, and I really say that reluctantly because it can be misleading, this idea that there are certain carbs which are really good and you can have as many as you want or as much as you want, and then there are carbs which are really bad. Okay, but when it comes to the really so-called bad carbs, it's going to be your sugars and your flour-made foods. Okay? All right, what are some other food examples of starchy, complex carbs? So if you're thinking beans, you would be right. So although beans are technically legumes, beans on average are about 50% protein and 50% starch. That's why you'll find a lot of vegetarians who tend to be a little bit overweight, if not sometimes a lot overweight, because they don't want to touch meat for their source of protein, so they're really stuck eating beans and things like that for their protein, but as a result, taking in a lot of starch that way. Now, there are some exceptions to the bean category, and one exception would be green beans or string beans. But don't worry, you'll get a list of all the exceptions, and you'll get a list of low starchy, high fiber foods and vegetables which are good to eat. What are some other food examples of starchy foods? Peas would also be on that list, believe it or not. Okay. Other examples would be winter squashes, so butternut, acorn, pumpkin. So although these winter squashes are great vegetables, they tend to be pretty starchy. Now, the exception to the starch category would be the summer squashes, so that's going to be the zucchini, the yellow, green, and even spaghetti squash. They're good to do, and don't worry, they will show up on that list of high fiber, low starchy vegetables which are good to consume, okay, in moderate amounts. What are some other food examples of complex starchy foods? Anything else comes to mind? Root vegetables like beets. Now, having a little bit of beets on top of your salad is no big deal, but if you're eating a whole jar or half a jar of pickled beets, you're going to end up getting a lot of starch that way, and actually with the pickled beets, often sugar is also added, okay? Some other examples would be plantain. If you do any exotic foods, African foods, Caribbean foods, it would be fufu and kenkey. These are all made from root vegetables. And one thing that we left out so far, what about whole grains? Whole grains definitely belong in this starchy, complex carb category. Now, a lot of people think about whole grains as the so-called good carb. Now, whole grains, without a doubt, are certainly much better for us than the flour-made foods and the sugars, but realize that whole grains are very starchy foods. So when I'm saying whole grains, I'm talking about couscous, I'm talking about quinoa, I'm talking about even oatmeal, granola, wheat, millet, things like that. So eating a whole bunch of whole grains and losing substantial amounts of weight don't really go together, okay? But we'll come back and we'll discuss whole grains specifically, because as you lose substantial weight and as you start to approach your goal weight, one of the very first starchier foods to come back on the menu will be certain amounts and certain types of whole grains. But again, we'll come back to that. Okay, so this is a good representation of the second category of carbohydrates, which are starchy, complex carbs. So what about that third category of carbs that we talked about? We called this third category indigestible carbs, and the common name for this group is the fiber. Okay, now the reason that fiber is indigestible simply means we can't digest it, we can't break it down. So we humans lack the GI enzymes and the GI machinery to break down fiber. So as a result, when we consume fiber, it's in the mouth and out the other end virtually unchanged. So fiber is a carbohydrate, it's indigestible, and it is a really, really good kind of carb, because I'm going to tell you here some benefits of fiber. So let's think about some of those benefits. What are some of the benefits of eating fiber that you've heard about over your lifetime? Benefit number one would be 0 calories, because we can't break it down, we can't convert it to fuel, so there are no calories in the fibrous parts of foods. What are some other benefits of fiber? Second benefit of fiber is, hopefully you said, it keeps you regular. So that's really important, that fiber is good for bowel regularity. I tell my patients all the time that on average, a healthy bowel regimen is to have a BM 2 to 3 times every day. BM 2 to 3 times every day, and having adequate amounts of fiber in your diet can help you to achieve that. So that's benefit number 2. Benefit number 3 of consuming fiber in your diet is going to be that it helps make you feel fuller, okay? So when you're eating foods which have high amounts of fiber, the fiber in those foods will help you feel fuller. Why? because again, we can't break down fiber, so it kind of sits in your stomach, it expands, it takes up space, and there's less room to put other things in your stomach as a result. What are some other benefits of fiber? Another big benefit of fiber is that it actually does lower cholesterol. So if you're suffering from high cholesterol, you want to certainly max out safely and directed by a health practitioner the amount of fiber in your diet, because this may be a way that you can reduce the amount of statin lipid lowering medication that you're on, or potentially coming off that medication, of course, under the direction of a healthcare practitioner. Okay? So fiber lowers cholesterol. What's another benefit of fiber? Another big benefit of fiber is it helps flush toxins out of your colon. So even after you have a BM, there's still going to be some debris, of course, left over in your colon. So fiber kind of helps sweep away all those additional toxins in your colon. And then lastly, a big benefit of fiber is that it slows the absorption of sugars in the bloodstream. So if you were to eat something sugary along with something fibrous, the fiber itself would form a gelatinous matrix, so thus reducing the absorption, slowing the absorption rather, of the glucose into the bloodstream. It doesn't really stop the glucose from going into your bloodstream, but it does slow how fast it goes into your bloodstream. And of course, we'll talk about this in much more detail later in a later discussion, but that's really important because you never want your sugar, your blood sugar, to spike up and down a lot, because as a result, your insulin level will go elevated, will go high as well. Okay, so those are some huge benefits of consuming high fiber foods. And like I mentioned before, I'm going to give you a full, very well detailed list of high fiber vegetables to eat. Now, where do you find fiber? You find fiber in nuts and seeds and vegetables and fruits, in whole grains, in legumes and peas, things like that. It's the stem, it's the stalk, it's the branch, it's the husk, it's the peel. All that stuff that looks like it won't break down, guess what? It's really not breaking down necessarily in your body, okay? Fiber is a good thing. It is a type of carbohydrate. It's important that you understand that, okay? So let's review. Tell me, what are the three categories of carbohydrates again? Hopefully you said simple carbs, also known as sugars, complex carbs, also known as starches, and then indigestible carbs, also known as fibers. So you got your sugars, you've got your starches, and you have fiber. Those are the three different types of carbohydrates. Now, hopefully you're getting that, because before you can start reducing the number of grams of carbs you're consuming each day, you have to first know what's a carb. Okay, now you'll be provided a handout of everything that we just listed, so you can actually read it at your leisure and get all the great details. So let's move to the next level. So let's imagine that if we took some sugar in any form, let's say it's sugar from a fruit, or sugar from table sugar, or sugar from agave nectar, or sugar from syrup, or some sweet sauce. Hi there, Dr. Jeff Brown. Hopefully you enjoyed that 25-minute preview of my course, Learn How to Burn Body Fat for Fuel. And if you want to complete the entire course so that you can start losing 1 to 4 pounds per week by directing your body to burn body fat for fuel, just click on the link below and I will see you on the other side. So hope to see you soon. Take care.